5th, 2021. Ask Ms. Jenkins to call the roll, please.
Mr. Richards?
Present.
Mr. Toller? Ms. Abrams?
Here.
Mr. Westmoreland? Mr. Duncan?
Here.
Mr. Bush?
Here.
Mr. Moore?
Here.
Ms. Simmons?
Here.
Ms. Dominguez?
Present.
Our first item on the agenda is to adopt a new policy, policy GAMEA, related to alcohol and drug abuse testing. Mr. Jinko is going to present this policy. Mr. Jinko.
Good evening, Ms. Stilly, the board. Hope everyone's doing okay today. We again come to you for policy GAMEA, alcohol and drug testing for general employees. This policy addresses drug screening of employees who are not required to drive as part of their responsibilities as authorized by state statute. Even up until this morning, we would like to make one minor change on first page, number 2, where it says, upon being informed by their immediate supervisor of the circumstances that justify a drug test, an employee shall present himself/herself to a school board approved testing facility for a blood test or hair follicle test to determine if alcohol and/or drugs are present in the employee's system. And then continue it with the rest of that paragraph.
So you're taking out certified urinalysis?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That has been the contention amongst the lawyers. So we're going to take it out and use the blood test or hair follicle test.
Okay. And Mr. Jenkins, this was a policy that you had submitted to the board for approval before, and we had tabled it until today's meeting, right?
Correct, yes, sir.
And that was for, the reason that we had tabled it over was because we wanted council to review it and, or do some additional reviews on it, as well as wanted to have some discussions with other advocacy groups. Is that right?
That is correct, yes, sir.
Okay.
And we bring this to you with all that have been done.
All of that's been done?
Yes, sir.
But with the request that we make this, or with the recommendation that we make this one additional change, right?
Correct, yes, sir.
Okay. So are there any other, we're going to, I'll accept a motion to amend as outlined by Mr. Jinko. But before we do that, do any other board members have any questions or comments? Okay.
So
Ms.
earlier you
Dominguez?
said, so all of our legalities, union, everybody's square with this?
Everybody is square with, yes, ma'am, especially with this change that was just made, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Just want to make sure. Thank you.
All right, so is there a motion to amend the first sentence of number 2 after the words, as a condition of employment, the employee shall, amend that sentence to read that upon being informed by their immediate supervisors of the circumstances that justify a drug test, an employee shall present himself or herself to a school board approved testing facility for a blood test or hair follicle test for substance abuse.
Okay, I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
Mr. Jinko, read the sentence one more time with your adjustment.
It says, upon being informed by their immediate supervisor of the circumstances that justify a drug test, an employee shall present himself/herself to a school board approved testing facility for a blood test or hair follicle test to determine if alcohol and/or drugs are present in the employee's system.
And make the results available to the Tangipahoa Parish School Board?
Correct, yes, sir. That continues.
So that would be the whole sentence?
That's the whole sentence, and the next part, the school board shall pay, stays in there also, yes, sir.
Gotcha. Okay. Are there any, so we have a motion by Mrs. Dominguez, seconded by Mr. Westmoreland, to amend. Are there any questions on the proposed amendment? Are there any objections to the proposed amendment? Hearing none, the amendment is adopted by unanimous consent. We'll now move on to the policy as amended. Are there any questions on the policy as amended?
I move to adopt it as amended.
A motion by Mr. Westmoreland to adopt as amended, seconded by Mrs. Bailey Simmons. Is there any other discussion? Is there any public input? Hearing none, ask members to vote your machines.
Voting is open. Yes for Ms. Richards. Voting is closed. Motion passes unanimously.
Next item on the agenda is to consider the approval of proposed policy GAMEB. I'm sorry, is that a repeat?
No.
It's EB.
First one was A, and this,
Oh, okay, EB, related to alcohol and drug abuse testing for employees with official driving responsibilities. All right, Mr. Jinko?
thank you again, sir. Again, the policy addresses employees that have official driving responsibilities, and a few of the minor changes are on, the last few pages where we changed shall to may, are most of what the changes are that we bring back to you. Again, after councils for numerous agencies have reviewed it.
But what the board would be adopting is the entire policy with those changes
Yes,
from
sir.
your original recommendation.
I apologize for not making that clear. Correct, yes, sir.
All right, is there a motion to adopt the proposed policy as recommended by the administration?
I'll make the motion.
Motion made by Mrs. Bailey Simmons. Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Ms. Richards. Are there any discussion or questions on the proposed policy?
So
Is
the,
there- Mr.
so the
Dominguez?
random drug testing will be the same wording, blood test or hair follicle test, or is this a urinalysis test since they're driving? It doesn't really say what kind of drug test, does it?
I know for what we currently do for our bus drivers, it is a urinalysis.
Yeah, because it doesn't really say that. I mean, do we need to have that?
I don't think so because it's required by,
It's the state statute with the driving.
yes, CDL requirements require those tests.
But it doesn't say what kind of,
I think
how detailed of a test, I guess is what I'm getting at.
I think it's outlined in the statutes of what
Okay.
testing has to be done for the individuals that drive, that have driving responsibilities.
So we don't necessarily have to add the extra words in, okay.
Any other questions on the motion? Is there any public input on the motion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. Ask members to vote your machines.
Voting is open. Voting is closed. Motion passes unanimously.
All right, next item on the agenda is to consider the deletion of a policy EBBI related to a public health emergency. Mr. Jinko.
Thank you, sir. The policy EBBI was specifically for the 2020-2021 school year. Bessie has sent out their new guidance for the 2021-2022 school year, which we are following. So that's why we asked for the deletion of this particular policy.
Is there a motion to adopt the administration's recommendation?
Motion to adopt.
Motion made by Mr. Westmoreland. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Dominguez. Any discussion? Any
Mr.
Mr.
Yeah, Mr.
Moore?
Jenko. Okay, so you said, your general statement was that this policy is being replaced by a 2021?
The guidelines that were sent out for
guidelines.
the 20, like, an example is this policy requires, when students and individuals come, that their temperature be taken. For the 21-22 school year, that is not a requirement or not a guideline set forth by Bessie.
I see.
Any other questions? Is there any public input? Hearing none, we'll call the question, ask members to vote your machine.
Voting is open. Voting is closed. Motion passes unanimously.
Next item on the agenda is to consider the deletion of policy Jbcc, which dealt with emergency leave that had been funded under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which is now expired and no longer applicable to the school system. Is there a motion to adopt the administration's recommendation and delete this policy?
I make a motion.
Who was that?
Ms. Abrams.
Ms. Abrams makes the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Westmoreland. Any discussion by the board? Are there any questions? Is there any public input? Hearing none, we'll call the question. Ask members to vote your machines.
Voting is open. Voting is closed. Motion passes unanimously.
Next item on the agenda is to consider some proposed revisions to the pupil progression plan for the school year 2021-2022. Mr. Jinko.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Our pupil progression committee met, reviewed the various aspects of the committee reports, came up with the following recommendations as a committee, and we present these to you today to add to our 2021-2022 pupil progression plan, with the explanation to the right as the reasoning they came up with these particular recommendations.
All right. Is there a motion to adopt the administration's recommendation?
Motion to adopt. I'll second it later.
Okay, Ms. Richards? Ms. Richards makes the motion, seconded by Mrs. Bailey Simmons. Do any members have a question related to the recommendation?
This number 4, so about the spelling. So exactly what are they're not going to have a traditional spelling lesson. How are they going to learn spelling?
Well, they're going to learn spelling as we tie that into the other parts of the curriculum, the writing, reading, and so forth, as they write their stories. That's where we'll incorporate spelling into that.
They'll just basically have a spelling test based on those words and not, they're not going to have spelling words to go home with?
Well, not spelling words per se in what we were used to, where, I was given a list of 20 words, and on Thursday you had to spell and bee, and if you got them all right, you finished, and then have to do it on Friday. But it is not going to count as a minor grade as it has in the past. So it's still going to be tied. We're still going to have to check spelling in the writing and so forth, but not as a complete minor subject, I guess is the best way to describe that.
It's incorporated into the ELA grade, right? Yeah.
So there will still basically be words that have to be defined and by the students, and they will still have to demonstrate that they can spell.
Correct, in a writing format more compared with the English language curriculum compared to just a spelling test, correct.
Okay, now I understand that it's not going to be in a subject format, but are there going to be words selected that the students will have to define in that curriculum?
There will be words, the students will be responsible for knowing how to spell. the way we're checking that is going to be a little bit different than what we've done in the past. I hope, maybe that, does that?
That explains.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Yes.
Any other questions on the motion? Is there any public input on the motion? Hearing none, we'll call the question, ask members to vote your machines.
State Department.
Voting is open. Voting is closed. Motion passes unanimously.
Next item on the agenda is to consider proposed revisions to policy GAMD, drug-free workplace. Mr. Jinko.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. With the help of forethought, our attorneys and the attorneys from various organizations, we've kind of taken this policy and expanded it and reformatted it a little bit to kind of, God bless you, add some information and different steps to assist our employees if we ever have to use this particular policy. So it's just kind of a reformatted with better delineation of the information.
Is there a motion to adopt the administration's recommendation?
Motion to adopt.
Motion made by Mrs. Richards,
Second.
seconded by Mrs. Bailey Simmons. Any questions from the board? Is there any public input? Hearing none, we'll call the question, ask members to vote your machines.
Voting is open. Voting is closed. Motion passes unanimously.
Next item on the agenda is to consider proposed revisions to policy GBD related to employment of personnel. Mr. Jinko.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. We've just updated the hiring procedures for the employment of personnel that shows the most recent mutual consent agreement with the court as reflected in this update.
I'll make a motion to accept.
Motion is made by Mrs. Dominguez. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Bailey Simmons. Mr. Jinko, one question. I guess I just want to check my understanding. It says that the superintendent shall delegate to the school principal all decisions regarding the employment of any teacher or other personnel at the school in which the principal is employed, subject to the approval of the superintendent. However, I thought that would not have applied to like the assistant principals or other supervisory level positions. Is that right?
There is a process that we would go through that is for hiring an assistant principal that is different compared to hiring of a teacher. So the assistant principal goes through the process, a recommendation is made, superintendent reviews everything, and then either approves or does not approve of that recommendation after it goes through that committee process.
Right.
Whereas the hiring of a teacher, let's say if I need a math teacher, then the principal reviews the applicants, makes a recommendation, and again, the superintendent approves or does not approve it, but the steps are completely different.
Right. So I guess what I'm asking is, because this, and that was my understanding, this sentence says other personnel at the school, which I think is vague enough for some to think that that would apply to assistant principals that work at the school. So should we say, or other non-supervisory personnel or non-administrative level personnel, or something?
I think that would add some clarity and would assist, yes, sir. I like the non-administrative personnel.
Okay.
I can make a motion to amend, Mr. Duncan, to add that.
So motion is made by Mrs. Dominguez for that last sentence on the first page to read, that the superintendent shall delegate to the school principal all decisions regarding the employment of any teacher or other non-administrative personnel at the school in which the principal is employed, subject to the approval of the superintendent. So we have that motion by Mrs. Dominguez. Is there a second? Seconded by Mrs. Richards.
Okay, just give me a second.
While she's doing that, Mr. Jinko, are we now doing like assistant principals where they are hired not specific to a school any longer, or do we still hire them with a specific school in mind?
This last application process that we went out, we had 7 openings. So we have attempted to put out there 7 positions, go through the process, and then the administration kind of pick where we're going to put the individuals to help maybe racially balance our particular administrative staff at a school.
Okay. So we might do it either way. We might advertise with no specific school in mind, or with a specific school in
And
mind.
the most recent one we did put the 2 schools, because it was just 2 schools that were interested or that needed an assistant principal.
Okay.
So if I have a large number like the 7, we could do the general advertisement, but the individual principals will be on that interview team. We know the 7 schools that need the individual assistant principals, so those principals will sit in on the interview team.
Okay. And so regardless, right, when you're hired as an assistant principal, you can be transferred to any school.
Yes, sir. We all work at the discretion of the superintendent,
Okay.
all employees.
Not the board.
Mr. Jenkins,
Not the
Just
board.
clarified.
We
Not the board.
Go ahead, Mr. Bush.
that last, thank you, Mr. Duncan, that last sentence, subject to the approval of the superintendent, is that more of a, I wouldn't think Melissa would, say, don't hire this person, the principal fix them. Is that more of a, DSEG kind of thing?
Act 1.
Well, I mean, the Act 1 gives her the authority,
Okay.
as far as this administrative part, it is not an automatic, I'm going to go with the individual that the committee or the principal has recommended. So it is not an automatic, I'm going with that individual. There's some time that our superintendent takes and reviews everything and checks references, et cetera.
I was just thinking she's got so much work to do now. If the principal had okayed that teacher to hire that teacher, it would be due.
Now, I would say from 99% of the teachers, this is who the principal wants, I'm going to sign off on it.
Gotcha.
So Ms. Jenkins, you have that ready?
I do, Mr.
Any other questions on the amendment?
Oh, no, not the amendment.
Okay. So we'll call the question on the amendment, on the proposed amendment. We'll ask members to vote your machines.
Voting is open.
Just vote me the amendment.
Before we vote, Cindy, could you read that as it was
So the
amended?
proposed amendment is that, would change that last sentence on page 1, would read that the superintendent shall delegate to the school principal all decisions regarding the employment of any teacher or other non-administrative personnel at the school to which the principal is employed, subject to the approval of the superintendent. So it's just clarifying that when it reaches that assistant principal or higher level, it has to go through that formal process. All right. Have members voted?
Not all members, no, sir. Voting is closed. Motion passes unanimously.
We'll next consider the adoption of the policy as amended. Do we have a motion to adopt the policy revisions as amended?
I'll make the motion to adopt the policy as amended.
Motion is made by Mrs. Bailey Simmons. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Dominguez.
I
Any
just-
questions from the
Yeah,
board?
Just wanted to go back to that one question you asked him, like this last time when we had the 7 positions, I did have quite a few people that had applied for those, wanted to apply for those positions, but they did not want to apply to be placed anywhere. They were not really happy that they wanted to just apply for 1 or 2 schools, that they lived on the south end or the north end. So, I mean, is this, like you said, I mean, it's nothing in writing how we're gonna do it every time. It's just the last time we did it because we had so many. But, I mean, was concerned about the concerns that I got from people that had been with us 15, 20 years and did not want to apply for all of them. They only wanted to apply for a couple of them, and we wouldn't let them.
Well, I wouldn't say we wouldn't let them. You know, they could have applied, and I encourage everyone to apply and go through the process. And if I go through the process and I find out that I'm going to be placed at school ABC, he or she can say, I choose not to go to school ABC. You know, but, we need good administrators at all of our schools. So we encourage everyone to apply, go through the process, and let's see where you end up. You know,
But it's a
I mean,
good experience to apply no matter what, and to do the interview no matter what.
That's
But-
my recommendation. I think it's a
yeah.
good process for all individuals that want to be administrators to go through.
It's just a shame to go through a lot of that, and then they just turn it down
And
because
who's
it's
to
not
say
their
that-
spot.
Who's to say they wouldn't have ended up where they wanted to?
Yeah. Well, that's
we'll
true.
never know 'cause
That's
they didn't
right.
apply.
You never know. That's right.
Mr. Jenko, if we're taking applications from several applicants for, say, 7 applicants for 5 positions, are we making all those applicants aware of where those positions are, which
Yes, sir.
schools?
Yes.
Or-
We
And
did
and
it.
are we taking in a
did.
preference from,
Well, I mean, when we put the advertisement out, we had assistant principal, 7 positions. After it ran a few days, we put a link to let everybody see where the 7 positions were, to where they would know where they would be placed at one of those 7 positions if they were the recommendation. That we did not allow them to say, I want to go to school X or only school Y. We did not do that. God bless you.
so during the interview, are we giving them like a preference thing, from 1 to 7?
No, sir.
We're
No,
not?
sir. They are interviewing for an assistant principal position. Our 7 administrators will be there. They will go through the process. The individuals will make a recommendation to the superintendent, and the superintendent will either accept or not accept the recommendation. And then if she does not accept the recommendation, she will recommend the person to be placed at that particular school.
I see.
How did the process work? Because you've been around a long time, Mr. Jacob. It worked good compared to the other way you've seen it.
I think the process that we're doing now is a lot more thorough, and we're going to end up with better individuals at our schools that are more prepared to help us at our schools. It is a more of a thought-provoking process that we're doing now than we did previously. Dr. Fussell, would you agree with that?
Completely, absolutely.
Any other questions from the board? All right, any public input? Hearing none, we'll call the question. Ask members to vote your machine.
Voting is open. Voting is closed. Motion passes unanimously.
All right, next item on the agenda is one of our all-time most controversial policies, to consider proposed revisions to procedures for selecting cheerleaders, dancers, flag corps, and pep squad members. Dr. Hurst.
Good evening, Board. The changes you see in this policy are the recommendations of principals and the teams that these are issues we saw every year, so we felt there was a need to put these changes in here so the principals will have something to stand on when making these selections and developing these teams. Do you have any questions about any particular change?
Before we take questions, we'll take a motion to consider the administration's recommendation on the proposed revisions. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Motion is made by Mrs. Dominguez. Is there a second?
Second.
By Mr. Westmoreland. All right, questions?
Very first one, the very first change in the middle of the first, number one, each school shall request specific changes and submit a copy of all information and forms to the superintendent. Okay, if we're submitting a request for specific changes, then what are we gonna do if they wanna change something that's not what you wanna do? I mean, why are we adding that?
This is particularly in response to, you have some schools who make an emphasis on tumbling, for example. And I'm not a cheerleader dance expert, but you take some schools, they don't even consider tumbling. Some schools do. And our rubric is very generic that all schools use. So if you take a Ponchatoula Junior High and say, we're gonna put an emphasis on tumbling, we wanna add that score to our rubric, they have to get permission to
Okay.
do that instead of just adding something without us knowing it and notifying the parents.
Okay. And then, this is from back in the day, number 4, why does it take 3 days to tell somebody they made a squad? Because back in the day, we knew the next day we went to school. We tried out after school, the next morning we knew if we made it or not.
That's a safety guard. We want to make sure that we check and recheck these scores because we have found issues where the calculations at the school level were not quite right, and then we rushed and made a judgment of who made the team. And when we double checked after that, then we realized some girls were excluded because of errors on us or shouldn't have been on the team. So it don't always take 3 days, but they give us that window to make sure we're doing this right.
Also on number 4, selective squad captains and other leadership office positions shall be based on the highest composite score made by the judges. Do they know ahead of time who's going to be trying out for those positions, or is it the whole entire group that tries out?
It's the whole entire group unless a young lady say, I don't want to be a captain. So therefore, if I get number 1, 2, or 3, she won't be selected. It'll be the next one to fall in line.
So
But they know it's-
basically, a freshman can come up and win captain.
I don't,
With-
I don't
the way it
agree
is
with that
now,
at all. I don't agree with that.
I don't agree with
At
this
all.
either.
It's been like that since I've started dealing with it.
Well, and I can say this from my own perspective because I was that freshman that made captain of my corps, and dealing as a captain over seniors was almost impossible, and it made my freshman year miserable. And you just don't have the push to do it as a freshman. I mean, I had somebody that backed me up, but
Or the experience.
all the experience. I just think, I think maybe that would fall on if they decide on the request for specific change. Maybe the sponsors would be able to say, only our juniors and seniors can try out for captain.
No, I think that should be in here, right there. Selection of squad captains should be a junior or a senior, not.
With the highest score.
With the highest score.
Now that I would agree with the highest score, but not a freshman.
So on that line, I would like to amend, adding that exact, what we just said, selection of squad captains with the highest score, that's a junior or a senior, shall be based upon the highest composite score made by the judges. And keep that in there, but add junior, senior.
Our motion is made by Mrs. Dominguez to amend the last sentence of number 4 to read that the selection of squad captains or other leadership officer positions shall be
A junior or senior.
based upon the highest composite scores of the judges amongst the juniors and seniors who tried out. Is that?
Sounds good.
No, I don't have that, Mr. Duncan. Can you repeat that, please?
So the selection of squad captains or other leadership/officer positions shall be based upon the highest composite scores made by the judges.
It's the same sentence, Cindy.
Same sentence.
It's the same thing. Just add,
How about based upon
Among the juniors
highest
and seniors.
composite score? Yeah.
Dr. Hurst, can I ask a question? And
Yeah,
like
Mr.
you,
Bush.
I'm not familiar with the process. And Mr. Mingus is going way back when she say in the old days, because I know how old she is.
Way back.
But And Mr. Duncan, maybe you can help me, you might know more about this than me, about the composite scores. Are they judged on any of their leadership ability, or their supervising ability, or it's just their tumbling and jumping? Because if they get a high score because they're a great tumbler and a great flipper, and what does that mean when it comes to actually being a leader of the squad?
Yes, the composite score is strictly with their dance routine that they practice, and they have 3 judges that score them on a rubric, and they get the composite score of those judges.
So, Rose, help me here. Maybe add something else other than the composite score.
We don't have a copy of the, I know there's a score sheet or a form sheet, the criteria they're looking for, but I don't know if it has anything about leadership, and how would they know if they're a good leader? I mean, how would they know?
Because the person who scores the highest might be a junior, it might not have any idea about how to lead the squad. Rob, you might help me on that, I
Okay.
don't know.
Just, hold on, guys. Y'all,
Well, my intent
Wait-
was not
wait
for
a minute.
other leaders, other leadership.
Hold on.
My
Are you
intent was for
withdrawing?
captain.
Are you withdrawing?
Well, we're
I
trying
need-
to.
I know, but I need to
your
I need to get
motion.
us in order, just a minute. I need to have either, I either have a motion and a second or not, and then we can discuss it, but like right now, we're just,
But the motion you were saying is what I was trying to
You
go
want
off
me to
of.
read it?
okay. Yeah, let's first get
The amendment that
something.
you were saying?
I know.
Is what I was trying to go off of, but what you said, other leaders, my intent really was for captain to be at least a junior or a senior, not necessarily the other leadership. Because, you know, you may have first lieutenant or second lieutenant, depending on what school it is, and you may have a 10th grader that could do a smaller level but not be captain.
Okay, so then here's what I would, so
Add a sentence to it.
add a sentence that says, the captain of the squad shall be a junior or senior. And leave that other sentence the way that it is,
With the highest composite score.
With the highest composite.
with the highest composite score. Would that do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. And then you could, the other one, the rest of the sentence, be basically the same thing, just taking the word captain out. Basically, you're writing the 2 sentences twice.
Okay,
So one for captain, one for other leadership.
okay. So your motion is for the number 4, the last sentence would read that the squad leadership/officer positions shall be based upon the highest composite scores made by the judges, period. The squad captains, because you can't have more than one captain, right?
Well, you can have co-captains, yeah.
Yeah.
That would be under other leadership.
Yeah, other leadership.
No, we just say captains.
I
Okay.
say captain. It's-
So the
you mean
squad
one
captain shall be the junior or senior who scored the highest composite score made by the judges.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, go ahead, Ms. Jean.
So the first the last sentence should read, selection of other leadership officer positions.
No, just the selection of leadership/officer positions shall be based upon the highest composite scores made by the judges. The squad captain shall be the junior or senior who scored the highest score on the composite scores made by the judges.
Just use the same sentence at the end.
Just
Shall be
same
based
sentence,
upon the
just-
highest composite score made by the judges.
Right.
Use that same sentence.
Same sentence, just put captain, junior, senior.
Yep.
We're getting too many sentences.
Yes,
So-
two separate sentences.
Okay, good.
All right, so that is the motion by Mrs. Dominguez. Is there a second?
Do you have it?
I'll make a second.
Would you like for me to read it, Mr. Westmoreland?
Nope.
Second is
You
made by
got it, and
Mrs.
I'm good.
Abrams. All right, now, did you want to go back to the discussion about other,
Don't we have to vote on the amendment?
well, we got to, I don't know
The
if they
amendment.
want to make revisions to this proposed amendment or not related to that leadership composite. That was what
What
Mr.
does-
Bush was.
Well, I'm just worried about the girl's been there for 3 years and then she scores a 80, and the girl who just shows up from another state, who walks up there and tries out because she can flip and flop and she's really good, scores a 81. That's going to be our captain. And I don't know but I don't know enough about it. But if y'all say it's okay, I'm cool with that.
Well, there's no way of them knowing their leadership ability unless a teacher gets involved and gives her recommendation. And then there you put in our employees making the decision.
How do they pick them now? With the score?
Well, that's what I was saying. Do you remember what's on, I mean, y'all made the form.
There's no leadership.
There's no leadership.
No.
Yeah.
What I would recommend, if you go that route, is have
That's how it
the
used to
school
be.
administrative team,
That's how it used to be. My daughter.
select, I ain't gonna say select the captain, have the young ladies
Interview or something with a series of questions.
have a process they go through to qualify to try for captain before they even try out. So if you have 3 juniors and 3 seniors, and they all want to try for captain, they go through a process with the school administration to see if they qualify with the leadership skills, because they wouldn't know the students. I wouldn't put it in the teachers' hands because then you get into the favorites. I wouldn't put it in the sponsor's hands, put it in the administration to say, okay, you have the qualifications to be a captain, you can try for it. But we set up a rubric.
So at this point, this can be accepted, but we can always adjust your not policy form to add a leadership column if you want to do that. I mean, if we can do that. And it wouldn't have to change the policy. It could be the rubrics that would be adjusted.
But just for the record, all the teams are set for this year.
But yeah, that's,
This will be for next school year.
yeah, well, that's definitely right.
So we can table this and we can have a bigger discussion.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We can fix this, but we can also
Yeah.
talk about the form or the rubric that they use.
These will go into effect for actually the spring when they have tryouts around March or April
I'm
for the
thinking-
following school year.
I'm speaking from experience. We had a fit at Point Hill High School a couple of years ago over this.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Well-
what I'm saying. So, yeah.
Good.
All right, thank you, sir.
Can Bring that, I'll take it.
Okay.
Are there any other discussion on Ms. Dominguez's amendment? So, Ms. Ms. West, I'm going to ask you to meet with Mr. Jinko to talk about this. We don't have any general input tonight because this is a committee meeting, but he'll talk to you about that. Both of those have to do with just general input, right?
It's not general input, it's a problem that has.
I know. But it's meaning something that's not on, specifically on our agenda. Could you meet with Mr. Jinko just so he can walk you through what the issue is there? Any other discussion on the motion by Ms. Dominguez? All right, it has been seconded. There's no public input on that motion, so we'll call the question. So this would be to amend, or revising and adding those sentences related to the juniors and seniors being captains. Members, vote your machine.
Voting is open. Voting is closed. Motion passes unanimously.
So we'll next receive a motion to adopt the proposed revisions as amended.
You talking about on just number 4?
Yeah,
No, this,
the whole thing.
for the whole policy.
Okay, so number 5.
Okay, so we have another proposed amendment. Number 5, go ahead.
Okay, so number 5, that was one of our biggest things we had this year, and I'm glad to see y'all added that. It shall be determined by the principal and assistant principal or the sponsor which selection process was used. It shall be a natural break in the scoring or a preset number prior to the scenario. So before tryouts, are we going to have a definite, you are going to be a natural break, or we're going to decide that after everybody tries out?
They go make that announcement before the trials.
So we definitely know, we're picking 20 kids, no matter where the break falls. All right, because we had,
Or A natural break?
or a natural break, as long
Right.
as they
One or the
know
other.
ahead of time.
One or the other.
Okay.
Okay, that's good. Appreciate y'all adding that and changing that. And then the last two are good too.
Okay. So are you making the motion to
Make
adopt?
a motion to adopt as amended.
Motion is made by Mrs. Dominguez to adopt the proposed revisions as amended,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Westmoreland. Is there any further discussion from members of the board? Is there any public input on these proposed revisions? Hearing none, we'll call the question. Ask members to vote your machines.
Voting is open.
Mr. Duncan, I would recommend you go back to number I this time and come back to the other.
I would have been told that we are pulling that one. Are we still pulling?
H, you pull an H.
Oh, pulling, we go to H. Yes, sir, I got you.
So we're skipping down to which one?
Aye.
I understand.
Aye.
Mr. Jenko,
Voting is closed. Motion passes unanimously.
are you going to go to,
No, we're going down to I, which is Byron.
what do y'all want me to, are we pulling, we're pulling H.
Pulling H, but moving to I because Mr. Byron's going to handle
I
that.
understand. Thank you.
He's
So
doing
we're
I through the
pulling
end.
H.
Yeah, so
We'll go back to Mr. Jinko's.
the 3H is being pulled from the agenda and will be brought back after the, will be brought back later. We're going to come back to F and, or no, we're going to take F up now.
We're actually on E.
E. You got to go to E.
Got to go to E.
Thank you, I'm sorry. All right. So next item on the agenda is to consider approval of proposed revisions to policy IFCD related to school volunteers. Mr. Jinko.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. When we pulled this last time, there was we've had some thoughts to combine the policies. Board had other decisions. So what we've done, we've separated and we've added the one part that I think the board liked from the athletic volunteers about the respective school will be responsible for the cost of the background check. So that's what we've added and asked for your approval.
All right,
I'll make a motion to accept the change.
motion is made by Mrs. Dominguez,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Westmoreland to adopt the proposed revisions. Are there any questions from the board? Is there any public input? Hearing none, we'll call the question. Ask members to vote your machines.
Voting is open. Voting is closed. Motion passes unanimously.
Next item on the agenda is to consider proposed revisions to policy Jbcc related to school admissions. Mr. Jinko.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. A few of the changes reflects registration being an online process instead of at the individual schools as it was a few years ago. Adds a section with the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. And then one of the last changes references the Moore versus Tangipahoa Parish School Board civil action that prevents anyone, non-residents or inter-district transfers.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept.
Motion made by Mrs. Dominguez.
second.
Seconded by Mrs. Bailey Simmons to adopt the administration's recommendation. Any questions from the board? Is there any public input? Hearing none, we'll call the question. Ask members to vote your machines.
Voting is open. Voting is closed. Motion passes unanimously.
Next item on the agenda is to consider proposed revisions to policy Jbcc related to student assignment. Mr. Jinko.
Thank you, sir. This is just reflects the updates to the policy with the recent court order changes, the mutual consent changes, and that's all we're doing is updating the language to reflect those changes.
Is
I'll
there a
make a
motion?
motion to accept.
Motion is made by Mrs. Dominguez. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Bailey Simmons to adopt the administration's recommendations. Any questions from the board? Is there any public input? Hearing none, we'll call the question. Ask members to vote your machines.
Voting is open. Voting is closed. Motion passes unanimously.
So here I want to make sure I'm hearing correctly because I got confused. You're wanting to pull the one related to student public school choice, Dr. Hurst?
No, it is,
Okay.
I don't have a whole agenda speech on this, so yes, it's,
Okay, so we are pulling I,
yes.
but first, before we, I guess, formally do that, let's go ahead and take up H, which is proposed revisions to policy Jbcc related to public school choice. Mr. Jinko.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Just language that makes public school choice that it's going to be in compliance with our court's consent order.
Is there a motion
Bless
to
you.
adopt the administration's recommendation?
I'll make the motion to adopt.
Motion is made by Mrs. Bailey Simmons. Is there
Second.
seconded by Mrs. Dominguez. Any questions from the board? Any public input? Hearing none, we'll call the question. Ask members to vote your machine.
Voting is open.
Mr. Jenkins, I have a question for you, not related to this real quick. We are following the Department of Education quarantine policy now.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, double checking that.
Voting is closed. Motion passes unanimously.
All right. At this time, agenda item 3I will be pulled from the agenda, which dealt with proposed revisions to GAMIA, and the administration will bring that back to us at a later time. So we'll next move on to consideration of proposed revisions to policy Jcdab, the Student Code of Conduct. Dr. Hurst.
Yes, this is come from forethought, and the student conduct policy reflects statutory additions requiring the school board's code of conduct to include progressive levels of minor through major infractions and identify corresponding minor through major interventions and consequences. The new statutory language also requires that the code of conduct reserve expulsions for the major tier of infractions, including weapons or drugs, or when the safety of students and staff has been put into jeopardy. It's also required to include the appeal process for expulsions.
These only changes in the second paragraph.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Move to adopt.
So a motion made by Mr. Westmoreland, seconded by Mrs. Richards. I had a question, Dr. Hurst.
Yes.
So in this section with the proposed revisions on the first page, it says that, it says before an initial referral for a student's expulsion, the Code of Conduct shall require the prior administration of interventions in accordance with the minor tiers in this Code of Conduct. Okay, except in instances when the expulsion referral is a result of accumulated or the underlying incident threatens the safety and health of the students or staff. Okay. But I thought that in one of these policies that it's either in here or in another one, we have like specific things that would result in an immediate referral for expulsion.
Yes.
I guess is the suggestion that all of those fit into that category of posing a risk of harm or something like that?
Yes, when it comes to drugs and weapons and major assaults, that's an immediate harm to the safety of the school.
Okay. And then in this code, it already, we build in the proposed interventions and consequences for those minor infractions?
Yes, that's been in place for several years now.
Okay. So it's really not changing anything, it's just adding kind of an additional introductory language?
Yes, sir.
Because the code itself is not, we're not proposing to change that today?
No, sir.
Okay. Any other questions from the board on the proposed amendments or revisions? All right. Is there any public input on the motion? Hearing none, we'll call a question.
Voting is open. Voting is closed. Motion passes unanimously with Mr. Bush not being present.
Next item is to consider proposed revisions to Jcdab related to student alcohol and drug use. Dr. Hurst.
Yes, this policy just adds that when a student is under the influence, that the principal or the designee shall refer the student to an alcohol and drug abuse treatment professional. And normally what we do in that case, students who test positive or have drugs on campus, we refer them to drug court and they put them in a program.
Move to adopt.
Motion is made by
Second.
Mr. Westmoreland, seconded by Mrs. Bailey Simmons. Any questions from the board? Any public input on the motion? Hearing none, we'll call the questions. Ask members to vote your machines.
Voting is open. Voting is closed. Motion passes unanimously.
Next item on the agenda is to consider proposed revisions to Jcdab related to dangerous weapons. Dr. Hurst.
Yes, this is just forethought, giving us guidance on the correct definition of a firearm and, yes, firearm and dangerous weapon.
Move to adopt.
Motion is made by Mr. Westmoreland to adopt the proposed revisions,
Second.
seconded by Mrs. Dominguez. Any questions from the board on the motion? Any public input on the motion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. Ask members to vote your machines.
Voting is open. Voting is closed. Motion passes unanimously.
Next, we'll take up our second most controversial policy on the school system, the proposed revisions to Jcdb, the student dress code. Dr. Hurst.
Yes, do I hear a motion, a second, and we can vote?
I doubt it.
After probably a year going back and forth, I think we've come to a conclusion of what we can agree on at the school level for dress code. And as you can see in it, piercings other than in the ear are not allowed, which means pre-K to 12 may wear stud earrings, hairstyles, and I'm reading on page 2, number 3, hairstyles and facial hair shall be clean and neatly groomed. No hats or caps that distract from the unique environment of a school was added. And on the 3rd page, face coverings, which is dealing with our masks. Students must wear face coverings of any color, with or without school logo, or the students' names or initials. They must be made of solid material, not mesh. The age group that is required to wear them will be dictated by the state minimum guidelines. And these were the recommendations pretty much of the committee and the board that we finally, I think, agreed on. moving forward.
So, but now, Dr. Hurst, where did I don't remember us previously talking about allowing hats or caps. Where did that come from? Am I forgetting? The way this is worded is it's allowing students to wear hats to school as long as they don't distract from the unique environment of the school.
Yes, that's a good question, Ms. Dominguez, you were on that committee, you remember that conversation?
I don't know. I don't think we need to have any kind of hats,
Yeah.
unique or not unique at all. I mean, why would we allow hats?
Medical,
So I don't know why we're adding that.
Medical, it was for medical reasons?
except when a medical condition or
But
religious
yes,
belief
that's
so
already in there
warrants.
though. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
I would just say amend that to remove that. It's gonna say no hats or caps shall be worn on school campuses unless a medical condition, I
Is that
just like
supposed to be
make a
somewhere
motion.
else? I just don't remember us ever talking about,
To be honest, it's been so long, I just,
Yeah.
been going back and forth, I've gotten lost on it.
all right,
I'm gonna make an amendment
Yeah,
that's gonna say no hats, caps, or other headwear shall be worn on school campuses on regular school days except when a medical condition or religious belief so warrants.
or
Not,
just go back to,
not or other headwear. That's,
Well,
No,
I mean,
I don't-
was
I don't-
thinking whether that's a religious thing, the headwear, I don't know.
Yeah. Now, during the winter months, we don't have many cold days. But, for a student to wear a cap due to inclement weather
oh, but that's
should
not-
be permitted.
Oh, well, that's anytime they can do that, but they can't wear it inside, in the classroom, in the lunchroom, in PE class. This would allow them to just never take their hat off. I don't think we need a hat. I think.
Well, it says on school campuses, though. It doesn't say that it can't be worn in a classroom.
If there's a motion to amend it, we need a second,
And
then we can discuss it.
all right, so we have a motion by Mr. Westmoreland to reject the administration's proposed revisions to number 5.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Bailey Simmons. So we'll now open that up for discussion. Mr. Moore, you were saying something about being able to wear something outdoors during a cold day?
Well, outdoors would be still on the school campus. And I think that if it's cold, the student should be allowed to wear a cap. Now, if you want to restrict that to outside and not in the classroom, I understand that. But if a student needs to wear a cap to protect himself from the weather, I don't think we should restrict him from doing that.
When you say cap, you're talking about the skull caps, not the baseball caps, because that could be confusing.
Either one protects your head. If it's raining, if it's snowing, if it's cold, but it still stops the wind.
I think that's
But if
what
you-
they have their hoods on for their jackets. Their hoodie on their jackets should be okay for that. Most of them that wear jackets have hoods that cover their heads.
So what about the students who don't wear a hoodie? Or are we going to say that all students should wear a hoodie during the wintertime, on cold days?
Well, somewhere else it says in here that they can wear a pullover with a hood. They just got to take it off when they go inside. It does say that already. And
It's under
So-
other garments.
So we're
in one of
making-
these other garment
So we're
lines.
suggesting that the only way a student can
Further
protect
on down.
himself from the cold is by wearing a hoodie.
But not inside.
Or not, but not
You can
inside.
wear a hat now.
You saw it?
That works.
So it's further down, they can wear the hood? Or on the campus?
Yeah.
Under the other garments,
Outside?
Outside.
Yes, outside.
Have to be removed.
outside.
How about, Mr. Moore, how about if we add a sentence to number 5 that says something like, this prohibition or this provision shall not apply to the wearing of headgear outdoors
That protects from weather.
to
Inclement weather.
During inclement
during
During
inclement
inclement weather.
weather, provided that said headgear does not distract from the unique environment of the school. That way Dr. Hurst can get his green sentence in.
As long as it's outside, not inside.
Right, outside. How about just, this provision shall not apply to the wearing of necessary headgear during inclement weather outdoors.
Or, or you could just be more specific and say a wool cap or a baseball cap.
Oh, no, that's too.
I mean, how can you,
You'll get a
what kind
skull
of
cap,
distraction
you'll get
can
you would have to make a list.
you, I see.
You get that, Miss Cindy?
No, because, no.
Okay, all right. Now, that was just a suggestion.
Brent, you wanna reread it, to Cindy?
Do we have to vote on what we're doing right now before we add or subtract? Then we make a motion and second? Don't we have to
We
vote?
gotta vote on
We
the
already made
amendment.
a motion on the,
And
to amend.
second while we're discussing it, but
Well,
not-
You want to adjust your amendment?
When it has to do with the proposed amendment, rejecting the proposed revisions to number 5. So, I mean, he's asking,
No, I understand. I was just wondering if we got to vote on this first one before we
Right.
add something else to it.
Well, I'm gonna amend my amendment to add that other phrase in there
Or
that
just add at the end,
Brett,
except
added
for
to it.
inclement
Wait,
weather, but
I-
only outside.
One person at a time.
All right, Mr. Brett, please give Ms. Cindy your recommendation.
all right, I think that Mr. Westmoreland is proposing to withdraw his original motion and replace it with a new motion that reads that number 5 shall read as follows. No hats or caps or other headwear shall be worn on school campuses on regular school days, comma, except when a medical condition or religious belief so warrants. However, this provision shall not apply to the wearing of necessary headgear outdoors during inclement weather.
Perfect.
Good.
Can I ask why
Is
was,
that your motion, Mr. Westmoreland?
yeah, that's my motion. I said it well.
Seconded by
I'll make,
Ms. Dominguez.
That's a good one, Glenn. You did that well.
Ms. Abrams.
why was or other headwear scratched out to begin with, Mr. Hurst?
I don't know.
Was there a reason why we had that scratched out?
Those are recommendations of the committee. I don't recall of that conversation and why they scratched it out, but. that's
I
what they
mean,
said.
All
whatever.
right, so we can leave it in there, like he just read it.
Yeah, I would
Whatever
say,
Mr. Duncan just read.
Okay.
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, how Mr. Glenn wants it.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Any board questions on Ms.
On the
We get ready to vote?
on number, just on this number 5? Did you have something on number 5 with the revisions that we made?
With the hats?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. So, any other questions from the board on the proposed amendment related to number 5? Any public input on the proposed amendment on number 5?
We're just voting for 5.
All right, no, so we'll call the question on just number 5, and ask members to vote your machines. I'll read it one more time as what number 5 will read if this motion passes, is that no hats, caps, or other headwear shall be worn on school campuses on regular school days, except when a medical condition or religious belief so warrants. However, this provision shall not, how did I say it?
Man, how'd you say
Miss
that?
Cindy to say.
Miss Cindy's got it.
Shall not apply to necessary headgear during outdoors in inclement weather. Is that what you wrote?
Yeah, a headwear, not
Can I
headgear.
read what I have to you and see
Yes,
if it's
yeah.
acceptable? I have that he made a motion to reject the recommended changes, which would be and other headgear, and take out that distracts from the unique environment, and insert, however, this provision shall not apply to necessary headgear outdoors in inclement weather.
Yeah, I think that's, yeah.
That's exactly what I said.
Would it be headgear or headwear? It wouldn't be gear, it would be headwear, wouldn't it?
Bo.
I think they're,
It's
inter-
gear and wear is the same thing.
yeah, they're interchangeable, so.
All right, everybody got it?
Got it.
Got it.
All right, vote your machines, please.
Voting is open.
Or as we call it in the Italian world, burritos.
Can you spell that, please?
A burrito.
Voting is closed. Motion passes unanimously.
All right, now, Ms. Bailey Simmons, you have one you wanted to,
Which one are we going to address now?
whatever, whichever one you want to do next. Did you have, or did any other members of the board have anything else related to the administration's recommendations to the dress code?
I do.
Okay, Ms. Bailey Simmons.
Yeah, I do, with the earring and the mustache. I had thought it over for quite a long time, and I feel like it will be opening the door to problems on our campuses. The earring will soon, the stud will soon become a teardrop or something else, and the mustache will get longer and longer, and the facial hair also, and I feel like that we're just opening the door to a lot of problems, and especially for the principals that have to decide if it's a real stud or if the mustache is too long or not. So I'm not going to be able to go with this. I just, I feel like it's just the beginning of a lot of problems, okay?
Okay.
Well, you're saying mustache, but do you you mean beard?
Facial hair.
Well, I think we already had mustaches, didn't we? We already had mustaches in here to start with. I think
They scratched
they're just adding beards,
it. Add facial hair.
facial hair.
Now, but I'm reading this to say that we are still only allowing stud earrings and only in the ear. Is that right? Okay. And that's, so that one's the way you want it, but you're talking about the facial hair that we would be allowing?
Well, yeah, but I'm not for the stud or the hair. I'm just saying.
Ms. Bailey, you talking about Simmons, you talking about the girls or just the boys in the stud earrings?
Oh, I see what
Are
you're,
the girls now wearing stud earrings?
yes.
Okay, but not boys now.
They do. Try to get away with them, and
I mean, they do, but they're not supposed to.
they do, but they're not supposed to.
Okay, but the girls are
Yeah,
allowed.
girls wear 'em.
Yeah, so we're talking guys.
I got you. I understand now. Thank you. All right. Are there any other proposed amendments or questions? Ms. Richards?
clarify, number 3,
Okay.
on the hair, the natural occurring hair. Ms. Cindy, could you?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Okay. Any hair may not be dyed any color other than a naturally occurring color. Is that naturally occurring specifically to that person or
In general,
in general?
Yeah.
So I can dye my hair black if I wanted to dye my hair black,
it's a natural color.
as long as it's a natural,
Right.
okay.
Any other questions from the
So
board?
what if your hair is black? Can you bleach it blonde?
It's
Sure.
a natural color.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Duncan, I have,
Green or yellow or
Hold on,
rainbow
Mr.
You
color.
doing yours blonde now?
I'm thinking about it.
Mr. Bush?
so it says earrings may be worn in ears by females. That's scratched out. So now we're only saying females can wear stud earrings.
Well, students.
Or student, I'm talking about, so girls used to wear any kind of earrings, but now they're only going to be allowed to wear stud earrings.
No.
That's what it says. Students in grade pre to 12 may only wear stud earrings.
The prior policy still only required stud earrings for students.
It said
But
earrings may be worn in ears by female. It didn't say stud earrings. It just said earrings.
Right, but then it went on to say students in grades pre-K to 6 may only wear stud earrings, right?
Yes. I
Okay.
don't know why that word was on the line, but it should be, yeah, that was correct.
But the prior provision only allowed females to wear earrings.
Yeah, oh, I knew that, but when I was working, they wore any kind of earrings. It just wasn't stud earrings. So that's why I was like, females did only, of course.
Now,
They don't wear them.
can't get the
anymore.
most
It's mainly
all the
stud
earrings.
Do what?
They don't wear the bigger rings anymore. It's mainly, that's why we restricted to stud earrings.
Okay. And I'm not trying to be picky, Dr. Hurst, but red is a natural hair color for some people.
Well, yeah, but not.
Not
no
blood
color
red,
no.
not the color of like red, not like her purse.
A regular person red.
Okay, so is it students in grade pre-K to 6 or
12.
12.
12?
It's 12.
So it's now just going to be all students.
We can wear an earring if it's a stud.
So they can't wear this.
They can't wear the little hoop.
No,
It's hard to get that mask around them hoops anyway now.
Yeah, that's
And we
also,
restrict that because of fights.
yeah.
Yeah,
that's
that
a
is
safety
true.
issue.
That's a safety, that is.
All right,
Okay.
any other questions from the board? I believe I need a motion to adopt the administration's recommendations as amended.
I make a motion,
Which
if
one?
Dr.
Make a motion,
Hurst.
Dr. Hurst brings it back and again and again and again and again.
I second the motion.
All right, so the motion is for the whole policy as amended to be adopted, made by Mrs. Abrams, seconded by Mr. Westmoreland.
And just to go down further, more definite on the school T-shirts. They may be allowed to do it just one day a week, not every Friday, or not every day of the week, but one day a week designated by the school principal. And that is going to be the policy, and we need to enforce that policy. And then also with the jackets, I think we're doing away, a lot of the people were complaining about having to wear the jacket, if it had a hood, if it had a zipper, so now they can wear a jacket. Doesn't matter if it's school, color, whatever, as long as they take it off in the classroom. Is that what it said? Or they can wear any jacket and keep it on all day, or,
Keep it on.
And we know they can't wear the hoods in the building, the hoods.
but they can wear any jacket, anytime, all day, anywhere. And never take their coat off. If it says LSU, they can wear it all day, it don't matter.
That language is in here somewhere.
I'm just trying to, because we have so many kids that don't ever want to take their jacket off, and it's definitely not school uniform, although it's impossible to find school.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had a lot of controversy about that, so it's impossible to buy exactly the same color, maybe. But are we just going to allow them to wear their coats on all day in classroom?
As long as they don't have the hood on, that's what that
That's
says.
what it
Yeah.
says, as long as they don't have the hood on.
Yeah, some students are just cold, bro.
I know, some students are just
I'll be
cold.
wearing one.
I
Yeah,
mean,
some teachers just run the AC
promise
in
you
the
that.
wintertime.
All right, I have one more question.
Question, Ms. Abrams?
Charity events, it says twice per year that they can wear out of uniforms.
that's by the superintendent. Like, options or whatever.
Yeah, but it says twice per year. So does
That's
that
right.
mean only 2 charity events are going to be able to participate
That's
per
what it's
year?
always been, though. And it's got to where lately it's been every other day, they're asking people to send $1 for this and 50 cents for that, and you can wear jeans on Friday if it's, and then families are complaining because they don't have enough money, they got 5 kids in there. The kids can't wear jeans if they don't pay $5 or $1. So that's why we went to just 2 times a year.
That's been
With the
established.
charity
That's been an
events,
established policy, yeah.
twice a year, we do the United Way campaign, and we do another campaign, so those usually are given by the district. But homecoming and Red Ribbon Week has to be approved by the superintendent, any changes they make away from the dress code.
Yeah.
And we do that anti-bullying Red Ribbon Week all around the same time.
Yeah.
Which is actually in October. October is National Bullying Month, so they will be doing something towards the end of the month to recognize bullying and highlight it.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the board on the motion? Is there any public input on the motion? All right, we'll call the question on the motion. Again, this is to adopt the administration's recommendations as amended. Ask
Voting
members
is
to
op-
vote your machine.
I'm sorry, Mr. Duncan. Voting is open.
Dr. Hurst, thank you for working on this. I think it was a good compromise for us. We got some of it in there.
Voting is closed. Motion passes with Ms. Simmons voting no.
All right, thank you. We'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is to consider proposed revisions to policy JD related to discipline. Dr. Hurst.
Yes, this is a combination of Forethoughts review and the district administration reviewing this policy to change some of the language that we use to kind of mirror our CCI work that we're doing, so it don't seem as much as punitive as it seems more restorative, what we're trying to do, not to put kids out of school and have a positive outlook on discipline instead of being negative. The wording we had previous was kind of like condescending and it was just negative. So we try to be more positive in our approach with our discipline and saying how we're going to address it. So that's why you see all the changes in there. A lot of that is change of the wording. And if you have any questions about a particular section, just
Motion to adopt.
The motion is made by Mr. Westmoreland, seconded by Mrs. Richards. But Dr. Hurst, on this, I almost feel like we ought to have a separate long meeting on this, because it seems to me there's a lot of substantive changes here that all essentially add up to, and I'm welcome you to talk me out of my position, but it seems to me that what this is doing is, on the whole, making it more difficult for our administrators to discipline children who are causing disturbances on our campuses, and or removing them to a more appropriate place like the alternative program. So to me, this is a lot of words that kind of add up to that, but I would welcome you trying to talk me out of that.
yes, so we've actually reviewed this. The teachers union has went through it with a fine-tooth comb. They had one particular section they had an issue with, but this is actually a combination of another policy that we deleted, and we took some of that language and added in here. I can't remember what policy it was that we deleted.
I'm not sure.
And combine some of that language in this policy. But if you have a specific question, we're just trying to be more positive in the approach and put more safety protocols in place and processes and procedures. So we're not just excluding students for any reason at all. It put more onus on the administration. And our policies and our procedures still the same for the code of conduct.
So right now, if a student gets in a fight, just a general fight, they on campus, I know we used to immediately, you got in a fight, you're going to the alternative program. What's our new procedure for that?
Right now, when a student or students get into a fight, schools have a fight protocol that they have to fill out. They assess each student's involvement, and it could range from recommendation for expulsion to the alternative school to 3 days out of school suspension or even PAT. It just depends on the level of or what the altercation was. If the student was defending themselves and got hit first, maybe treated differently from the student who actually initiated the contact. So that's why we created those protocols to stop sending every kid who threw a lick. And we've seen in a lot of cases, kids who were defending themselves were sent to the alternative school. So as a parent, what you want your kids to defend themselves and they're just hit for no reason or attacked at school. And we realized there was a big issue.
So if you're in a fight and you are found to have been, let's say, the person
aggressor.
the aggressor,
Mm-hmm.
but it's your first time getting in a fight, what happens to that student now?
It's a whole document that they fill out, and it has check boxes to say what was the level of aggression, did the student comply when you spoke to them. So it's a checklist they go through to help the administrators make a decision of what's best for that particular student in that case. So if you got a student who's typically out of control, won't listen, and just the aggressor and constantly attacking the other student, or just that student probably be recommended for expulsion, versus a student, when you tell them to stop, then they stop, and they go sit down, and they calm down, and they let you deal with the situation. They would be treated differently.
So look, minimum offense at a high school level. I mean, so you got into the fight, you were the one that started it. What's your best case scenario? I mean,
Yeah,
you
so-
could actually still come to school the next day?
No. So if you have a one-on-one fight, two kids fighting, they may get up to 5 days out of school suspension.
Okay.
Because they listen, they stop the fight, they may get up to 5 days out of school, up to. But the administration will say, well, it wasn't that bad, you may get 3 days. Each of you may get 3 days. So that's really on the administration to make that decision.
Okay. But then, okay, so again, so my minimum would be what, 3 days? Or could it theoretically, could they be back in school the next day?
I don't know of any cases where kids were put back in school the next day, but I know of cases in the past where students sit down eating lunch, not bothering anybody. And a student just walk over and hit them in the back of the head and start fighting. That student pushed the kid off and swung to get the kid off of him. That's still a fight, but that student was not the aggressor and was not engaging this other student. So that student technically could come back to school the next day.
No, I'm talking about the aggressor, though. I'm talking about the aggressor. They're going to at least be out for 3 days?
Up to 5 days or recommended for expulsion.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Bush, I'm glad to hear that, right? I mean, this is a much more compassionate policy. You know, it actually invokes more skill and and mentoring and counseling. Because because bullying and agitation among students has been around since forever. I mean, it's been there since I entered school from day one. And I know that that's not something that's going to go away because, you know, what we're facing is a spiritual enemy here. And so it's never going to go away. We're just going to have to deal with it, until the end times. But I do believe that a student who gets jumped on, it's his natural tendency to defend himself. All right, nobody's going to jump on me, and I just cover up and hope that the police come, and they get arrested, and then they're going to get their just due. And I'm going to defend myself on the spot. I think that this is a kinder, more compassionate policy, but I think it's going to be a more effective one. I believe it serves as a deterrent for the aggressor, knowing that he's not going to be able to get someone thrown out of school on purpose. So just jump on someone you don't like, and you're not doing well in school, so you're going to jump on someone that you don't like who may be doing well in school, and both of you are going to end up at the alternative school. So I do think that this is an improvement over what we've had before.
So I guess the next point, Dr. Hurst, our question I had was, and look, everything that Mr. Moore says is nice, and I don't necessarily object to the notion that those are all good things to do in theory. My concern is the workload that we're putting on our individual schools by asking them to do all of this. So that would be my next question this thing talks about setting up discipline committees, which I guess we were supposed to do that on some level in the past, but it now also talks about a student assistance team, all these various interventions that we're now asking the individual schools to have to do and set up, and we're making it more difficult for them to remove these students to the alternative program. In the past, my understanding was that the whole purpose of us investing in this new extensive alternative program was that our schools would be able to shift that burden over to the alternative program rather than expecting them to have to do all of this. But it doesn't sound like that's what we're doing now. And so if we're not, what additional supports are we giving these schools to implement all of this?
Let me clarify.
Okay.
The policy that we have before us now is catching up with what we're already doing. So the SAT team, the restorative practices, trying to reduce the amount of kids going into alternative school, we put in procedures and processes for all of that 2 years ago. But we're just not changing the policy to reflect what we're doing in the schools at this moment.
So yeah, talk to me about that. That what have we? Because I don't know what. I haven't seen all of that, particularly at some of our high schools where we added extra personnel on the school campuses to address this shift. So have we done that, and what am I missing?
Well, initially we didn't add extra personnel. We just trained them on how to carry out these meetings and how to identify those students. Instead of a kid getting in trouble, you automatically rendering a suspension. Now, we're not talking about the major stuff like drugs, weapons, major fights. Those are being dealt with on a daily basis. We're talking about those kids who are skipping class, who are constantly getting little minor stuff. All of these processes assist those students to keep them from getting to those 5 or 6 or 7 referrals that could require, well, this principal could say, make a recommendation for expulsion. So we provided training on the new SAT process that we revised 2 years ago. We trained each school on it, and that process actually gets parents involved from the very beginning. So one of the things we tell the schools, if you bring a kid through the SAT process, it's nothing more than an SBLC meeting that's been around for 20 or 30 years. We just revised it to call it the Student Assistance Team to support all students and to get the parent on board early. So have we added extra personnel and hired new people? No, we haven't. I mean, I wish schools want them. We'll hire them if we get the permission, but we train our administrators of how to be selective and selecting the right people on your campus to assist with these teams. And we have people in the central office that do restorative practice. They'll go train the schools in restorative practice, conduct those meetings. So we did add our mentors to some of our more troubling schools last week. So that's an extra set of eyes and hands on deck to help those schools with those issues.
So I guess I'll cut to it a little bit instead of dancing. Okay, this is what I'm concerned, and this is because, like you said, we've been working on this for a couple of years now, and the issue that I'm seeing is that we took some people at our schools that were already overworked when their task was simply to say, oh, you violated this, here's your consequence, here's your slip, you go home 3 days, or here's your consequence, you go to the alternative program, right? Those guys were already overworked when that's all we were asking them to do. Well, now we've said, no, now we need you to do all of this extra stuff before you get to the point to where you can do all of that. And they're simply not able to do that. And so what now, the result of that is these students who either need these extra services that we have envisioned are not getting them because we haven't given the schools the resources to do it properly, or students that need to be removed from our campuses are not being removed from our campuses because the administrators just don't have the time to go through all of these extra steps. So to me, it seems like we need to do something here at the board level, that if we say this is what we want to do, we need to provide our schools with what they need to actually implement it. And so I guess I'm asking you to speak to that.
Yeah, and you made a valid point. You know, the administrators who were bogged down were saying, okay, Johnny, you did X, Y, Z, here's your punishment, go home. Well, we realized that wasn't working because Johnny went home. All he knows is he skipped class and he's suspended now, but there was no kind of trying to get Johnny to change his mindset. So Johnny came back to class, came back to school, and nothing changed. This process gets Johnny before a committee, gets his parent involved early. Instead of sending him home, let him sit at home, trying to work with him before it gets to the point where we have to send him home. That's the process we went to. Now, we implemented it in all of our schools. A lot of schools are doing great with it. A lot of them are saying this is the best thing ever happened. There are a couple of schools who are struggling, and we have offered guidance and assistance. Some are receptive, some are not receptive. So I would say it's working in more schools than it's not working in our schools.
So,
Because
but do we need,
Our discipline numbers have went down over the years. We can't count COVID year but prior to that, we had a reduction in out-of-school suspensions for our students.
but do we need to look at adding some resources to some of our schools so that they can properly implement this new procedure?
What you're gonna find when you ask that question to principal, they're gonna say automatically, yes, give me more people. Yes, they want more people.
Dr. Hurst, haven't you also worked to integrate some of the mentoring and counseling that the students are receiving from TASK, right, from the alternate education program into the public schools? Aren't they also following these kids up? Aren't they also counseling on the campuses?
They were last year, but this year they're placed in the schools so they can be there all day, identifying those students, pulling them, doing small groups, identifying neighborhood issues that's coming to the campus and try to be proactive in addressing that before it escalates. But
I mean,
we
because
just
this is-
placed them on campus last year.
Yeah, because
Last week.
when you stop to think about it, this is really supposed to be all about the children, right? This is supposed to be every child taken into consideration, and we doing our best for each child, without any exception, for each child, and my understanding is that the counseling and the interaction of the alternative education program is actually having a good effect. I mean, I think that's what you just said anyways, that it is having a positive effect.
No, I would say, I'm not saying the alternative program hadn't had a
I
positive
mean, as a
effect,
part of it, I'm not saying complete, I'm not saying that is the total
but
difference that's being made here.
the processes that we put in has drastically reduced the number of kids that we sent to the alternative school who necessarily didn't need to be there. We understand the drugs, the weapons, the major fights. Those are the kids that Ms. Stilly made clear we don't need on our campuses, disrupting our campuses. But you got other kids who's doing these minor things. And based on our data from several years ago, we were sending a lot of students to task for minor infractions. So that's why we came about with these processes to address those students. A kid who brings drugs and weapons is not going to say, okay, you got to go through the SAT process before you go to alternative school. They will be dealt with according to our policies. These are for the students who are constantly doing minor things on campus to address their behavior. So it doesn't prolong the students who get into major issues or commit major violations. Now, when they come back to school, they may go through the SAT process, but if the SAT process, because they didn't do it, does not prevent them from going to the alternative school.
Ms. Bailey Simmons?
Mr. Duncan hit the nail on the head with this is a major issue, and I met with a high school principal today, and on the positive side, they said that the mentors that they have from the TAF school have made a tremendous difference. They just don't have enough of them, you know, maybe, what is it, 2 per school or something like that, and said that it helped tremendously, but when you have, 800, 900 kids, you know, that's not enough to go around. But it does make a huge difference. And so whatever they're doing, the mentoring from TASK, which I'd already heard last year, but today I was on campus, and that's what they're saying. And but the principals, I think, are really overwhelmed with the discipline situation. We probably need to meet separate about all of that and do something else. I guess we can't have more personnel because we don't have the money, right? On the campus? Is that an issue? I mean, we could use disciplinarians in all of them,
We
you know.
afford not to.
Do we still have disciplinarians in every school?
Yeah.
But do we have a separate one?
I mean, there's, depending on what the school is, there may be an assistant principal that is over the discipline.
Well, other than those two, are we able to hire
I mean,
somebody
the principal is given
to somebody on the campus, right?
individuals that he or she
Right,
can use
yeah.
as they see fit.
Anyway, I'm just saying, it is an issue, and
Yeah.
we need to address it.
Yeah, and look, I want to be clear, I'm not opposed to the type of, you know, what the policy says. What I'm concerned about is that when you put something like this where you've added all of these extra layers of work on our school level personnel, I just want to make sure that we're supporting them in the way that we need to support them and providing them with the resources they need to be successful. I don't think it does us any good to adopt a new policy that has all of this beautiful language, but then say to the people who were already overworked before we said all of this, that we just want them to do more. We just need to make sure we're supporting them.
And we do support them at the central office level. Like, I'm gonna take one school, for example. I'm gonna take Ponchatoula High. They got 2,200 students. They probably need 2 or 3 more administrators. They need help. But when we sat down and went through with them the process and how it could look, and said, okay, be creative with your staff and put them in places where they're effective, it works for them. Now, is it a lot of work? They say yes, it is, but it's working to some degree for them. Other schools haven't been able to basically place their people where they need to place them for various reasons. So, and we've offered to work with those schools to help give them guidance on how to do that, and we still offer that guidance and give them the training that they need. So it is a lot, but when students come to the office and we just put them out of school, but then nothing is being done, they come back before they leave, they come back with the same behavior. And guess what? One suspension leads to 2. The second suspension leads to the 3rd, because there has been no interventions in between those suspensions or prior to the kid going home. So that's why over the years we have developed these protocols to kind of say, okay, let's work with these students who we can save. We understand we still have the kids who fight, bring drugs to school. We understand that, and we deal with those accordingly. But we're trying to catch those students that we don't want to get to that point. And that was the whole purpose over the years of developing these protocols in place.
All right. Any other questions from the board?
I have a question. So basically, in this middle, when you got the list of 13 things, so all it says is, once removed, the student shall be readmitted to the classroom until the principal has implemented at least one of those things. Okay, so how many times are we going to implement at least one of these things? That's what we're getting. We're getting that the kid is incorrigible, or they're exhibiting behavior issues, they're getting in trouble, and they're getting, like, whatever, they get referred to counselor, or they have a conference with the principal. Okay, well, we had a conference with the principal, you're very disrespectful to your teacher. Okay, like 5 days later, now you're very disrespectful to your teacher. How many disrespectfuls are we going to do before we remove them?
That's a school administration decision based on.
Well, according to what they feel like they can't ever remove disciplinarian problems because we're telling them to handle it on campus. Mm-hmm. How many times are we handling the same child who eventually becomes the problem in the fight?
Well, what would help with that if I knew a specific case, because here's another thing, you have regular ed students, you have SPED students. They fall under different guidelines. A SPED student, if it's related to their disability, they're going to remain on the campus. That's federal law.
Yeah, but that's not what we're hearing about.
Yeah,
We've been dealing with that issue for years. This is the new
That's a
stuff that
complaint we get a lot with SPED. That's a complaint we get.
But that's not these conversations that we, I mean, I'm just trying to,
Yeah.
I know, I mean, this is what the complaints that we're getting right now are related to this new implementation process. Again, where we're adding all of this extra expectations and work, not necessarily bad, but I mean, we get it's just like when the state comes down to us and says, okay, school system, I now want you to do all of this extra stuff, but I'm not going to provide you any money or support to do it. We just want you to do it. And my concern is that we're doing that to our school level administrators right now. We're asking them to do much more complicated work, much more difficult work, a lot more that maybe they had not been trained to do when they were originally trained to be administrators, but it's a new expectation. And the question is, are we giving them the training, the resources, the staff to actually accomplish what we want them to do? Because if we don't do that, then what's going to happen is they're just going to check boxes, or they're just going to refer back, and none of this is going to actually get done, and we're just going to keep students on campus that don't need to be on campus. That's, I think, or at least that's my concern.
Mm-hmm.
But I can say we have given them training. We're on standby every day if they need training and they request it. The SAT process is nothing new. It's the old SBLC process. We just revised it. So the that's been in our district for as long as I've been in education. We just revised it and made sure they addressed every student, not just a particular group of students. It was underutilized in the past. It was underutilized in the past. So, but I don't have the authority to hire a new person at every school to go help. But if you give us the okay, Brett,
Okay.
we'll advertise for 32 people, because once you give one school one, the other school will want one.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mingus, I kind of interrupted what you were saying.
I'm just not sure that I'm ready to vote on this as it is. I don't think I can, some of it yes, some of it not. So I'm like, it's almost like we just need to have a session about this. We just hearing the opposite side of it, and we're hearing a lot of complaints that we're not supporting our employees, and we're just making rules for making rule purposes.
Well, Rose, our employees are there for the children, all right? And I'm committed to finding a way to make things work better than they have in the past. I think that we've not had a tremendous amount of success in settling, in solving the problems that we have with discipline. I mean, because no matter what you try, there's going to be another challenge. You know, and I know this just dealing with my own kids. You know, you resolve one thing, and then there's an issue that comes up from a different direction. And like I said, you know, our true enemy is not a physical one, it's a spiritual one. And, you know, and until we look at it that way, I don't think we're going to be able to actually come up with a solution. We're just constantly going to be administering and trying to mend, you know, the breakages, the damages that happen.
Well, I can say everything that we've implemented in the past that's major, we've always gotten input from our administrators. We always give them opportunity to give input. Whether they choose to or not on some occasions, that was their choice. But these processes that we put in place over the last 3 years, we've always seek feedback from the principals of every school. Some give feedback, some don't. We even use some principals to help develop some of these processes and procedures. At each grade, at each middle, we try to get a middle, elementary, and high, because we want to get their perspective, because we understand that they have to implement it on the campus.
Yeah, I do not envy your position, Dr. Hurst. I think it's a very difficult one. You know, I think you guys are doing a fairly decent job with what I consider to be an impossible enemy. I'm going to just call it what it is. Like I said, I think the proposal that we have before us is better than the ones that I've seen. I mean, if it, maybe we need to just take it off the board and take it off the, you know, off of the docket and vote on this at a different time.
Well, I guess what I'm suggesting, and I guess what my introductory suggestion was, again, it's not that I don't want to adopt the revised policy. I think, though, what I would like to do is have a more full discussion before we adopt the policy to ensure that we as a board are doing everything that we can as far as providing resources, positions, whatever it is, so that when we adopt this policy and say that this is what we want to have happen, that we are doing everything we can to make sure we set that administration up for success. And I don't know that we have done that yet. I think we've started the process from what you're telling me, and we're receiving feedback as to what we are trying to get put in place, but I don't know that we're there yet, or that the board is, you know, maybe, like you said, maybe we do need to find some funding to do some additional positions or something.
I can tell you these came from student services, and student services have done everything they can to provide training to all the schools, go into the schools, and even show them how it's done. The only thing they haven't done was to say, okay, we're finna send you 2 extra people. We've even sat down with principals and say, this is how you can set up your team to make sure this process is done fluently. You don't always call the same teacher, you stretch it out, because if I'm not involved as a student, I shouldn't be in that meeting. So we fixed a lot of that, and we went to schools and trained principals, we trained teams, and we still will train them if they call and say they need it. The only thing student services haven't done was just give them extra people on the campus, because that wasn't their role. Their role is to get them trained on how to utilize these processes and procedures.
Right. Okay. So is there a motion from the board at this time?
We have a motion to approve by Mr. Westmoreland, seconded by Ms. Richards.
Are there any other motions?
I would like to just make a motion that we not vote on this today, and maybe vote on it another day.
So there's a motion
Because I
to
think it
table
would
to
be-
our next policy committee meeting, the proposed revisions to policy JD. That motion has been seconded by Mrs. Bailey Simmons. The motion to table is non-debatable. We'll call the question. Ask members to vote your machines.
We vote on
Voting is open.
We vote on the table.
This is a motion to table to our
Yes,
next
it is.
policy committee meeting.
Yes.
Before we vote, this is an issue, a policy that I believe should probably be discussed by itself. Yeah.
I understand. And maybe, and that may be exactly what we do. Yes, sir.
Okay, vote.
Vote your machines on the motion to table. Mr. Moore,
Voting is closed. Motion passes unanimously.
and Mr. Moore, the reason that we say to the next meeting is if your motion is just a table, then it kills it. So it just keeps it alive until we can get it back.
And I want to make a motion to table the last one as well.
Because it goes hand in hand pretty much.
The motion is made by Mrs. Dominguez to table to our next
Second.
committee meeting, JDE, seconded by Mrs. Bailey Simmons. Again, the motion to table is non-debatable. Ask your members to vote your machines.
Voting is open. Voting is closed. Motion passes unanimously.
All right, and that concludes the matters that before the committee. I believe we'll take about a 5-minute recess before the next committee meeting, but this meeting is adjourned.
What's the next one?
I believe next